Right, and this is, of course, in the aftermath of the retaliatory tariff rollout by Donald Trump, the US president, earlier today. Now, there are reactions, of course, coming into this. First, in terms of how other countries are reacting, how the world is reacting, Canada has decided it will put 25% retaliatory tariffs on US-made vehicles in response to the Trump administration's import taxes on foreign vehicles. This after Canada Prime Minister Mark Carney vowed to retaliate to tariffs issued by US President Donald Trump. He had said that he's going to respond with purpose and with force. Remember, 4 Republican US senators had broken ranks and voted with Democrats in an effort to block President Donald Trump's tariffs against Canada. But this is, of course, Canada's reaction. Remember, this is, of course, their retaliation to the earlier tariffs which had already been imposed by Donald Trump on Canada as far as Canada is concerned. Now, Canada has decided to slap tariffs on US-made vehicles. Let's listen into what Mark Carney had to say.
And today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the US approach with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA, our North American Free Trade Agreement, and on the non-Canadian content of CUSMA-compliant vehicles from the United States as well. Our tariffs, though, unlike the US tariffs, will not affect auto parts because we know the benefits of our integrated production system.
Right, and there's also, of course, strong reaction, sharp reaction coming in from the US markets where the stocks have dropped sharply on Wall Street. And the latest that we have is that FTSE 100 has suffered its biggest one-day fall since August. US stocks are, in fact, headed for its biggest wipeout in market value since March 2020. And as far as reports are to be believed, nearly $2 trillion have been wiped from the US stocks. Dow Jones has dropped by over 1,200, maybe even over 1,300 points as US stocks have plunged. Markets have, in fact, plunged as a reaction to the Trump tariff announcement. For more on this on the broadcast, I'm joined by Mr. Jeffrey Dennis. He is a US independent emerging markets commentator. Thank you, Mr. Dennis, for joining us here on NDTV. We can see it's not just the world which is reacting, but there's been sharp reactions on Wall Street as well. Was this expected?
I think what was not expected is the severity of the Trump tariffs. I think there was no anticipation that they would be this severe, nor that they would be simply put on now, or at least in the next 2 or 3 days, without there being the possibility, I think, of some sort of deal or series of deals to reduce them. Now, that could still happen, of course, but I think the severity of the tariffs means that although, in principle, so-called Liberation Day was anticipated by the markets, the severity of this was not. And this is why you're seeing the market reaction. If I could make one other point, is I think what these tariffs do is markedly increase the risk of a US recession. And the market reaction here, dollar down, equities down, bonds up, is a classic reaction in the market when recession fears increase.
Right, Mr. Dennis, as you were saying, that the severity of the tariffs which have been imposed by Donald Trump was not expected. But, you know, there's been, of course, a lot of talks as to whether or not US economy is heading for a recession. Do you think a move like this, which though Donald Trump has in fact denied in the recent past that there's no such indication, but do you think a move like this is in a way ill-timed especially when there are a lot of apprehensions in the market already?
Yes, I think that's right. Already, even prior to this announcement, of course, at the beginning of the second quarter, the first quarter data looks very, very weak, and we may very well get a negative GDP number. And if we don't, it's going to be very close to zero. And so there was already a lot of concern as a result of all the tariff talk and the initial tariff action by Trump that we would end up in a recession. And all that's happening here now, I think, is that these swinging tariffs, which will lead to retaliation, you've just mentioned Canada there, is simply increase the risk that there will be a recession. Because what these tariffs do is they raise the inflation risk in the short term. They also are likely to have the impact of squeezing consumers and therefore hurting consumer spending. The uncertainty creates uncertainty over corporates and their investment plans. And so I really do think the risk of recession in the US has now gone above 50%, possibly well above 50%. And that's what the markets are basically saying today.
Right. Mr. Dennis, I would also like to ask you maybe as a, where we go from here kind of question in a way. How do you think President Trump can, in a way, allay apprehensions in the US markets is concerned? Because the world is, of course, other countries are going to react as they deem best. Yeah. But in terms of US markets, how do you think that the government there, the dispensation there can, in a way, allay the concerns which have been raised because of this move?
Well, I don't think he cares. He doesn't seem to care about the stock market anyway. If he cares about anything, it appears to be the bond market, because what you need to finance this very, very large fiscal deficit and the debt levels in the short term is lower bond yields, and you're getting that. So that, I suppose, is something. But I don't expect him, unless this thing truly gets out of hand, to say anything or do anything that particularly supports the stock market, because what we know is going to happen here, even if he is right, and I doubt he is, but even if he's right, that what this does is lead to a revival of the US manufacturing sector, that's only going to happen in the long term. And the long term may be quite a long way out. Meantime, the short term concerns are for the economy now and the impact of these tremendously damaging tariffs right now. And I think the argument of all the administration people seems to be, let's take the short-term pain because the long-term is going to be a better manufacturing sector. What the market is saying is we've got to get from here to there. And the here, meaning the risk of recession short-term, is very, very dangerous. And I think that's what's going on here. And I would be very surprised at this point if Trump tries to lean into this weakness of the stock market to try to support it. Having said that, I do think what is possible is that, once again, Trump, well known for the quote-unquote art of the deal, could well use this reaction and use his tariff proposals here, or tariff action here, to try to get deals with overseas trading partners, which could lead to those tariffs, being reduced down the road. And I think the market would react well to that. But frankly, we don't know if that's the case now. And simply what the markets are saying is that these tariffs are worse than expected. They raise the recession risk, so we're selling off.
Right. Jeffrey Dennis there, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast with your thoughts. And returning back to the other story that we were following, the reaction from the world as far as these tariffs are concerned, as we were reporting that Canada has now hit back with retaliatory tariffs of their own, slapping a retaliatory tariff of 25% on US-made vehicles. For more on this, I'm joined by my colleague Maha Siddiqui. Maha, this is, of course, a decision taken by Mark Carney. He had already indicated in the recent past that they are going to react or respond with purpose and force as far as these retaliatory tariffs by Donald Trump is concerned. And, this is, of course, quite a forceful reply in a way that he had promised.
Yes, absolutely. This is an equal and reciprocal tariff response from Canada that is coming in the auto sector. 25% tariff will now be levied on US-made cars as well here in Canada. And this is because the US tariff on auto parts and the automobile industry came into effect from midnight. And Mark Carney had already pointed out that because this is going to hit the automobile sector in Canada badly and the workers badly, they will respond to this with purpose and with force, as you pointed out. We are already hearing news of job losses in Ontario province, which has a hub of automobile parts production. And therefore, during this time specifically, when people were just emerging from inflation, from a housing crisis in Canada, And now that elections are, the campaign is underway, elections are to be held on the 28th of April. This is a big political issue. Really, this is dominating the campaign here in Canada rather than the specific domestic issues that we were seeing over the last 1 year. This trade war with the US is what is now an overarching concern. And as I'm pointing out, the fallout is already for us to see with job losses being announced. Stellantis is particularly probably announcing job losses because they are moving out probably of Ontario province. At least that's what reports seem to be suggesting at this moment. And more such impact is likely to be seen on the people directly, on the workers directly. And therefore, Canada had to come back with this sort of response. Canada is also taking this opportunity as a time when they want to set themselves apart from the US. So far, they have been in the shadow of the US. For years, they have been an ally and a partner of US, depending on them. Their trade is largely north to south, not east to west, which is between the Canadian provinces. They are now looking at removing the interprovincial barriers so that the trade between the provinces improves and their dependence on US as the biggest trading partner for them gets reduced. But this, of course, will be a very difficult time. These changes do not happen overnight. Canada knows it. And that is why they have come back with this hard-hitting response to the US, specifically in the automobile sector.
Right. Maha Siddiqui there joining us from Vancouver. Thank you so much for giving us a perspective on that story. Of course, Canada being one of the first countries which has hit back with retaliatory tariffs today after Donald Trump's announcement earlier in the morning.